The mining drill whined as Nenah twisted the wrench one more time. Her small hands barely fit around the tool, but she knew the motion by heart. Dust Bowl Station needed every piece of equipment running, or the colony would starve. That was just how life worked out here on the edge of known space. Tighter, her father said from behind her. Robert Reeves crouched in the narrow tunnel, holding a light so she could see the connections. If it's loose, the whole assembly will shake apart when the drill hits hard rock. Nenah grunted and put her full weight into it. The bolt finally seated properly. She sat back and wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of grease across her skin. Done. Can we test it now? Robert checked her work with practiced eyes. He nodded once, that small smile crossing his face that meant she'd done well. Fire it up. Low power first. The drill hummed to life. No vibrations. No rattling. Just smooth operation. Nenah felt pride swell in her chest. She was 11 years old and could repair equipment that kept 200 colonists alive. Not many kids could say that. The moment of satisfaction lasted exactly 4 seconds. Alarms screamed through the tunnel. Not the regular maintenance alerts or the shift change bells. This was the sound that meant danger. Real danger. Nenah had only heard it twice before, both times during meteor strikes that nearly breached the hull that Robert's face went hard. He grabbed Nenah's shoulder and pulled her toward the tunnel exit. Move. Now. They ran through the cramped passages, climbing ladder after ladder until they burst into the main colony hub. People filled the space, all of them staring at the central view screen. Nenah pushed through the crowd until she could see what held everyone's attention. Ships. Dozens of them, arranged in formation above the station. They weren't coalition vessels with their clean white hulls and diplomatic markings. These ships were painted dark red, covered in weapon ports and scarred from countless battles. The Crimson Fleet, someone whispered. The name sent a chill through the crowd. Ambassador Kalin stood near the view screen, all 4 of his arms crossed in the trail gesture of deep concern. The diplomat's scales had gone pale, almost white. Nenah had never seen him look afraid before. The view screen flickered. A face appeared, filling the entire display. The creature had gray skin pulled tight over a skull that was too long, too angular. 3 eyes sat in a triangle pattern, each one burning with cold intelligence. Scars crossed every visible inch of skin. I am Warlord Drastak of the Crimson Fleet. You will listen carefully because I do not repeat myself. The voice was rough, like gravel scraping against metal. This station exists in space I control. You have been mining resources for my territory without permission. This is theft. Robert stepped forward, his hand finding Nenah's and squeezing tight. She looked up at him, but his eyes never left the screen. You have 48 hours to deliver payment, Drastak continued. 10,000 credits worth of processed minerals. Deliver this, and I will allow you to continue your pathetic existence here. Refuse, and I will demonstrate what happens to thieves in my territory. The screen went black. For a moment, nobody moved. Then everyone started talking at once. 10,000 credits? We don't have half that. He's going to kill us all. We need to evacuate now. Ambassador Kalin raised all 4 arms, calling for silence. His voice was steady, but Nenah could hear the fear underneath. We must be reasonable. The Crimson Fleet controls 3 full sectors. Warlord Drastak has destroyed 17 colonies in the past 2 years alone. We cannot fight him, so we just give him everything we have. Robert's voice cut through the noise. We spent 5 years building this colony. We've got families here. Children. Where exactly do you suggest we go? Quillen's scales flushed darker. I suggest we survive. The Coalition will not send help for an illegal mining operation. We established this station outside authorized space. We have no protection under galactic law. Then we negotiate, Roberts said. He released Nenah's hand and walked toward the ambassador. I'll go to his ship. Talk to him. There has to be something we can offer besides suicide or slavery. The crowd erupted again. Half the people shouted that negotiation was pointless. The other half begged Robert not to go. Dr. Hayes, an older woman with gray hair and steady hands, pushed through to Robert's side. You really think talking will work? She asked quietly. Robert looked back at Nenah. His expression was calm, but she saw something else in his eyes. Something that looked like goodbye. I think if I don't try, we're all dead anyway. At least this way, I might buy us time to think of something else. Nenah's chest felt tight. She wanted to tell him not to go, wanted to hold onto his hand and refuse to let him leave. But she'd learned from her father that sometimes you had to do the hard thing, even when you were scared. I volunteered to accompany Robert, Colin said. The Trell's voice was stronger now. As coalition ambassador, I can invoke diplomatic protocols. It might provide some protection. Robert nodded his thanks. He knelt down in front of Nenah and put his hands on her shoulders. Listen to Dr. Hayes while I'm gone. Stay in the safe zones. And Nenah, he waited until she met his eyes. If something happens to me, you remember everything I taught you. This station, all these systems, you know them as well as I do now. You're stronger than you think. Dad, don't. I'll be back before you know it. He stood and walked toward the docking bay, Colin following behind. Nenah watched him go, her hands clenched into fists. Around her, the colonists argued about evacuation plans and defense options. Nobody had any good answers. Nobody except her father, walking toward a warlord ship with nothing but words as weapons. She touched the small mechanical bird in her pocket, the one Robert had built for her birthday. Its tiny gears pressed against her palm through the fabric. She didn't cry. She just watched the docking bay doors close and waited. Robert's boots clanged against the metal floor as guards shoved him forward. The Crimson Fleet flagship was nothing like the clean, organized coalition vessels he'd seen during his military days. This ship smelled of oil and blood. Weapons lined every wall. The crew moved with the efficiency of predators who'd killed so many times it became routine. Ambassador Colin walked beside him, trying to maintain diplomatic composure. The Trell's scales kept shifting colors, betraying his nervousness. Two guards flanked them, weapons ready but not raised. They weren't considered threats worth worrying about. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. Robert had expected a negotiation room, perhaps an office. What he got was an arena. The floor was stained with fluids from a dozen different species. Weapons hung on racks along the walls. Seats rose in tiers around the space, filled with crew members who looked hungry for entertainment. Welcome to negotiations. The voice came from above. Warlord Drastak stood on a raised platform, looking down at them. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Each scar on his body represented a kill, or so the story said. If true, he'd killed hundreds. You want to talk? I want to see what you're worth first. A door opened on the far side of the arena. Something huge stepped through. It had 6 legs, armored plating, and claws that scraped sparks from the floor. The creature's eyes locked onto Robert with predatory focus. You fight my champion, Drastak said. You win, we talk. You lose. Your colony learns what happens to those who waste my time. Colin stepped forward, all 4 arms raised in formal protest. This violates 17 different diplomatic protocols. The coalition will do nothing. Drastak's laugh was harsh. You built your colony outside their protection. You have no rights here, only what you could take. Robert looked at the creature, circling him. He'd done combat training in the military years ago. He knew how to fight. But this thing outweighed him by at least 200 pounds and had natural weapons he couldn't match. The arena door slammed shut behind them. The crowd roared. Robert grabbed a spear from the weapon rack. It felt unbalanced, designed for someone with different proportions. The creature charged. Robert dove sideways, feeling claws pass close enough to tear his shirt. He rolled and came up moving to don't try to overpower it. Use the environment. His old instructor's voice echoed in his head. Every advantage matters in a real fight. The creature charged again. This time Robert was ready. He grabbed a chain hanging from the wall and swung aside at the last second. The creature's momentum carried it forward, straight into the arena barrier. The impact stunned it for just a moment. Robert didn't waste the opening. He drove the spear into a gap in the armor plating, aiming for where he hoped vital organs might be. The creature screamed and thrashed. Robert held on, putting his full weight into the weapon. Dark blood sprayed across the floor. The creature collapsed. The crowd went silent. Robert pulled the spear free and turned to face Drastak. We done here? The warlord's face was unreadable. Again, another door opened. Two more fighters emerged, these ones smaller but faster. Robert's muscles were already screaming. His hands were slick with blood. But stopping meant death for everyone on Dust Bowl that he fought. He used every dirty trick he'd ever learned. When the first fighter came high, he went low, sweeping its legs and driving his spear down. When the second tried to flank him, he threw sand from the arena floor into its eyes and finished it while it was blind. When the second creature fell, Robert stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard. Blood covered his clothes and hands. He looked up at Drastak and waited. The Warlord descended from his platform. He walked to Robert and studied him with those three cold eyes. You fight well for prey species, but you misunderstand what strength means. Before Robert could react, Drastak's fist crashed into his stomach. The air exploded from Robert's lungs. He fell to his knees, gasping. Guards moved in from all sides. You thought proving yourself in combat would earn respect, Drastak said. He grabbed Robert by the hair and forced his head up. You thought I would see you as equal, someone worth negotiating with. This is your mistake. Robert tried to speak, but Drastak hit him again, this time across the face. Blood filled his mouth. I don't need workers. I don't need agreements. I need examples. Drastak released Robert's hair and stepped back. Take him to the broadcast room. Let his colony watch what happens to humans who forget their place in the galaxy. Guards dragged Robert from the arena. Colin tried to intervene, but was held back by more crew members. The Trell's voice echoed through the chamber, citing laws and treaties that nobody was listening to. They strapped Robert to a frame in a room filled with recording equipment. Drastak activated the broadcast himself, making sure every frequency was covered. Every colony in 3 sectors would see this. Every station, every ship. This human came to negotiate, Drastak said to the cameras. He walked around Robert slowly. He thought words and fighting skills would protect his people. Watch what happens to those who share his delusion. The beatings started systematically. Drastak knew exactly how to inflict maximum pain without allowing unconsciousness. Every strike was calculated. Every injury was designed to be visible on camera. Robert didn't scream. He wouldn't give the Warlord that satisfaction. He kept his eyes open, staring directly at the camera. Somewhere on Dust Bowl, Nenah was watching. He needed her to see that you could be broken and still refuse to beg. His ribs cracked. His vision blurred, but he never looked away from the camera. Your colony has 24 hours, Drastak finally said, breathing hard from the exertion of the beating. Deliver the payment, or I will do to all of them what I've done to this one. The broadcast ended. Guards threw Robert into a cell. Through the pain, through the fog of damage and exhaustion, one thought remained crystal clear in Robert's mind. Nenah was smart. Nenah was capable. If anyone could find a way to save the colony, it was her. He just had to trust that he'd taught her enough. Nenah sat on the floor of the colony hub, her back against the wall, watching the view screen even after it went dark. Other colonists had looked away during the broadcast. Some had left the room entirely, unable to watch. Nenah had seen every second her father's blood on that floor, his broken ribs, the way his eye had swollen shut, but also the way he'd never begged, never cried out, never stopped staring at the camera like he was staring right at her. Around her, chaos had taken over. People shouted about evacuation ships that wouldn't arrive in time. Others wanted to gather weapons and fight, even though the station had nothing that could scratch a warship's hull. Ambassador Colin was trying to coordinate something with coalition officials who kept repeating that Dust Bowl wasn't their responsibility. Dr. Hayes sat down beside Nenah. The older woman didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, present and solid, while the world fell apart around them. He's still alive, Hayes finally said quietly. That's important. As long as he's alive, there's hope. Nenah pulled the mechanical bird from her pocket. She wound the key and watched it flap its tiny wings. Her father had spent 3 weeks building this, getting every gear perfect. He never did anything halfway. They're going to kill all of us anyway, Nenah said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Drastak doesn't want payment. He wants fear. He'll take our minerals and destroy the station anyway to make his point. He started to argue, but stopped. They both knew it was true. Nenah stood up. I'm going to Dad's workshop. Nenah, wait. but she was already moving, slipping through the crowd while everyone was distracted. She reached the workshop and sealed the door behind her. The space smelled like machine oil and metal shavings. Robert's tools hung in their designated spots. His workbench held 3 different projects in various stages of completion. Nenah went to his computer terminal and entered the password. Her birthday. The system unlocked immediately. She started searching through files. Her father had worked on Dust Bowl for 5 years, maintaining every system, upgrading what he could with limited resources. He told her stories about the station's early days, when it was built in disputed territory and needed to defend itself. There, a folder labeled Original Construction Plans Classified. Nenah opened it. Schematics filled the screen, not just for mining equipment and life support. These showed weapon systems, defense grids, targeting computers. Everything a frontier station needed to survive in hostile space. Most of it was marked as decommissioned. The Coalition had required weapons removal as a condition for allowing the mining operation. But her father was thorough. He'd saved everything. Nenah dug deeper. She found notes in her father's handwriting, technical observations about what he'd actually done during the decommissioning. He hadn't destroyed the systems. He'd hidden them, buried in the station's infrastructure where inspectors wouldn't look. Her hands started shaking. This could work. The weapons were old, probably degraded, but they existed. If she could access them, calibrate them, bring them online, the workshop door opened. Dr. Hayes stood there, concern written across her face. "Nenah, people are looking for you." "We need to." She stopped, seeing the schematics on the screen. "What is that?" "Dad didn't fully decommission the defense grid," Nenah said. She pulled up another file, showing power routing diagrams. He rerouted it through the mining systems, made it look like extra capacitors for the drills. But it's all still here. Hayes moved closer, studying the screen. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to horror. These systems would need manual calibration. Someone would have to access the station core directly. "I know." The radiation exposure would be lethal. Even with full protection, you'd have maybe 20 minutes before. "I know," Nenah repeated. She met the doctor's eyes. "But we're all dead anyway if we don't try. At least this way we fight back." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Outside the workshop, they could hear the argument continuing. People were scared, desperate, turning on each other. The colony was eating itself from the inside while Drastak's fleet waited above them like a guillotine. "You're 11 years old," Hayes said softly. "My dad taught me every system on this station. I can do the calibration. I'm small enough to fit through the maintenance tunnels to reach the core." Nenah pulled up another file, this one showing the route. "It has to be me. Let me talk to the others. Maybe we can find someone else. Someone older. There's no one else." Nenah's voice was sharp now. "Everyone else is arguing or giving up. And we don't have time." She was right, and Hayes knew it. The doctor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was resignation there, and something else. "Respect. I'll help you," Hayes said. "We'll need to modify a radiation suit to fit. Gather supplies for the tunnel crawl. And we need to do this without causing a panic." They worked through the night. Hayes quietly recruited 2 other colonists, people she trusted to keep their mouths shut and help with preparations. They found a radiation suit in the emergency supplies and cut it down to Nenah's size. It wasn't pretty, but it would provide some protection. Nenah studied her father's notes until she had every step memorized. The calibration sequence, the backup power routing, the manual overrides in case the automated systems failed. She traced the maintenance tunnel route on the schematics, noting every access point and potential obstacle. At some point, Ambassador Kalin found them. He stood in the workshop doorway, all 4 arms hanging limp at his sides. His scales had gone dull gray. "The Coalition has officially refused to intervene," he said. His voice was hollow. "They've classified Dust Bowl as an illegal operation. Any assistance would set a precedent they're unwilling to establish." Nenah looked up from the schematics. "Then we help ourselves." Cullen noticed the plans on the screen. His scales rippled through several colors before settling on a determined blue. "What do you need from me?" "Coordinate evacuation of non-essential personnel," Nenah said. "And when I activate the defense grid, I'll need someone in the command center to handle targeting solutions. Can you do that? The Trell diplomat straightened, his posture shifting from defeated to purposeful. I can. 12 hours until Drastak's deadline. Nenah suited up in the modified radiation gear. The suit hung loose despite their alterations. Hayes checked the seals 3 times. Once you're in the core, you follow the sequence exactly, the doctor said. No improvising. No heroics. You calibrate the systems and you get out. Nenah nodded. She didn't mention that the radiation levels made getting out unlikely. Hayes already knew. The workshop door opened one more time. A young colonist named Peter stood there. He was 16, worked in the agricultural domes. We heard what you're doing, he said quietly. A bunch of us. We want you to know that if this works, when Drastak comes, we'll be ready to fight. Others appeared behind him. Not everyone. Maybe 20 people out of 200. But they stood there, looking at Nenah with something she'd never seen directed at her before. They were looking at her like she was the adult, and they were waiting for orders. Just keep everyone safe, Nenah said. Let me worry about Drastak. She picked up her toolkit and headed for the maintenance tunnel entrance. Behind her, Dr. Hayes began explaining the plan to the colonists who'd volunteered to help. Colin moved toward the command center to begin preparations. Nenah opened the tunnel hatch and looked down into the darkness. Somewhere above them, a warlord waited. Somewhere in that warlord's ship, her father was locked in a cell, broken but not beaten. She climbed into the tunnel and sealed the hatch behind her. Time to see if Robert Reeves had taught his daughter well enough to save them all. The maintenance tunnel was smaller than the schematic suggested. Nenah had to crawl on her belly in places, dragging her toolkit behind her. The radiation suit made everything harder. The helmet restricted her vision. The gloves were too thick for delicate work. She ignored the discomfort and kept moving. Her father's notes were clear. Tunnel 6 connected to Tunnel 12, which led to the emergency access shaft down to the core level. Should take 30 minutes to reach the core chamber. T took her 45. The tunnel system had degraded over the years. Twice she had to stop and repair collapsed sections, using spare plating from her toolkit to shore up weak points. Once she had to backtrack entirely when a junction had sealed itself shut from thermal expansion. Her radio crackled. Dr. Hayes' voice came through, staticky and worried. Nenah, your suit's sensors show elevated temperature. Are you okay? Just hot, Nenah replied. She was soaked with sweat inside the suit. Almost to the access shaft. The deadline is in 9 hours. Drastak's fleet is holding position, but their weapons are charging. They're preparing for something. Nenah reached the shaft and looked down. 50 feet of vertical climb on a ladder that looked like it might fall apart if she breathed on it wrong. She tested the first rung. It held. I'm going into the shaft. Might lose contact. Be careful. The climb down was terrifying. Twice rungs broke under her weight, leaving her hanging by one hand while she found new footing. The suit's bulk kept catching on protrusions from the shaft wall. But she made it. The core chamber door was sealed with 6 different locks, all of them requiring manual override that IT took 20 minutes to get them all open. When the door finally swung inward, heat washed over her. The chamber was never meant for human habitation. It was a space for machines, for systems that didn't care about temperatures that could cook flesh. Nenah stepped inside and sealed the door behind her. The radiation counter on her suit immediately started climbing. She had 30 minutes before exposure became lethal. Maybe 40 if she was lucky. The core sat in the center of the chamber, a sphere of contained energy that powered the entire station. Conduits ran from it in every direction, feeding power to life support, mining equipment, communications. And somewhere in that tangle of cables and connections, her father had hidden the weapons grid. She opened her toolkit and got to work. The schematics had shown her where to look, but actually finding the connections in the maze of identical-looking cables was different. Her hand shook, not from fear, from the radiation. It was already affecting her. Nenah found the first junction box. Inside were the routing connections her father had described. She began the calibration sequence, adjusting power flow, activating dormant circuits. Systems that hadn't run in 5 years groaned to life around her. Warning lights flickered on throughout the chamber. The station's computer recognized what she was doing and started throwing alerts. Unauthorized weapons activation. Safety protocols violated. Immediate shutdown recommended. Nenah ignored them all and kept working. Above her, on Dust Bowl's command deck, Ambassador Kalin watched displays light up with targeting solutions and firing arcs. The Trell scales shifted to surprised gold. "It actually works," he whispered that on Drastak's flagship, alarms began screaming. The Warlord appeared on the bridge, his three eyes focused on the scans of Dust Bowl Station. "What am I looking at?" "Weapons signatures," his tactical officer reported. The creature's voice held disbelief. "Multiple emplacements. Defensive grid configuration." They were hidden in the mining infrastructure. Drastak's face twisted with rage. A mining colony shouldn't have weapons. The Coalition decommissioned them years ago. Apparently not completely. The Warlord slammed his fist into the command console, denting the metal. "How long until we're in firing position?" "We're already in position." "But sir, if they fire first, they won't fire." "It's a bluff. A desperate move by desperate prey." Drastak opened a broadcast channel to the station. "You've made an impressive discovery, but you're still outgunned 50 to 1. Power down your weapons and prepare to receive boarding parties." In the core chamber, Nenah heard the transmission through her helmet radio. Sweat dripped into her eyes. The radiation counter was screaming now. She'd been in here for 28 minutes. Her hands were starting to go numb. She finished the calibration on the third weapons array and moved to the fourth. This one was damaged. Corroded connections. Failed safety systems. She'd have to reroute power through backup channels. "Nenah, we're reading dangerous radiation levels." Dr. Hayes' voice was tight with fear. "You need to evacuate now." "Not done yet. You're going to die in there." "Already dead anyway." Nenah's voice was calm. She connected two cables, watching sparks fly. "Just need a few more minutes." Above, Drastak was losing patience. "Since you seem unable to make rational decisions, let me provide motivation." He targeted the station's agricultural dome, the one that grew all their food, the one where Peter and a dozen other young colonists were currently working. "This is what happens to those who defy me." His ship's main weapon charged. Nenah saw the targeting lock appear on her display. She saw the power buildup in Drastak's weapon systems. And she made a choice. She wasn't done with the full calibration. Only 3 of the 5 weapons arrays were online. The targeting computer was running on backup power. But she had enough. Nenah opened a direct broadcast channel. Not to the station's command deck. To every ship in the sector. She wanted everyone to hear this. "Warlord Drastak." Her voice was steady despite the radiation sickness making her vision blur. "You struck my father because you thought we were weak. You thought humans were prey. You thought we'd break." On his bridge, Drastak froze. That voice. A child's voice. "Try again," Nenah said. She activated the weapons grid. Targeting solutions locked onto Drastak's ship. "I dare you." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The entire sector held its breath. Then Drastak laughed. "You think I fear a child playing with?" Nenah fired. The first weapon array tore through empty space and slammed into Drastak's flagship. Not the main hull. She'd targeted the weapon charging to destroy the agricultural dome. The blast vaporized the entire gun assembly in a shower of molten metal. The second array fired half a second later. This time, she hit the engine cluster on a destroyer position to the fleet's left. Not enough to destroy the ship, but enough to cripple it, leaving it dead in space. The third array targeted a frigate's communications hub. The shot was perfect, surgical. The ship went dark, cut off from the fleet. Drastak's laughter died. He stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 3 shots, 3 hits. Perfect accuracy from weapons systems that shouldn't even exist. "Status," he roared. "Main weapon offline. Destroyer disabled. Frigate comm dark." She's not firing to destroy. She's firing to cripple us. In the core chamber, Nenah sagged against the equipment. Her vision was doubling. Blood trickled from her nose. The radiation counter had stopped screaming because it had maxed out its sensors, but the weapons grid was online. And every ship in the sector had just watched a child make a warlord flinch. She opened the channel again. "You have 24 hours to leave." Take my father with you, or I'll cut your fleet apart piece by piece. Then she collapsed. Dr. Hayes reached the core chamber in record time, climbing down the access shaft so fast she nearly fell twice. She found Nenah unconscious on the floor, radiation alarm screaming, the modified suit seals compromised from where the girl had torn off the helmet to vomit. The doctor hauled Nenah onto her shoulders and ran. Up the shaft, through the maintenance tunnels, ignoring her own safety because the radiation levels would kill them both if they stayed. She emerged into the medical bay and immediately began treatment protocols for radiation exposure that should have been impossible to survive, that Nenah's skin was burned. Her blood counts were catastrophic, but she was breathing. Somehow, she was still breathing. While Hayes fought to keep Nenah alive, above them the galaxy was exploding with activity. Every news network in 3 sectors was broadcasting the same footage. A child's voice challenging a warlord. 3 perfect shots that had crippled military vessels. The Crimson Fleet, famous for crushing resistance, stopped cold by a mining colony that on his flagship, Drastak paced like a caged animal. His tactical officers stood silent, waiting for orders that didn't come. The Warlord's 3 eyes fixed on the scan of Dust Bowl Station, trying to understand what had just happened. "She's a child," he finally said. "Tell me how a human child operated military-grade weapons with that precision." Nobody had answers. The shots had been too perfect. Each one had targeted specific systems, disabled without destroying. That took skill far beyond what any child should possess. "Sir, we're receiving broadcasts from 17 different colonies. They're all asking the same question." The communications officer looked terrified to continue. "They're asking if the Crimson Fleet is now afraid of children." Drastak's roar shook the bridge. He grabbed the nearest console and tore it from its moorings, throwing it across the room. "Prepare all ships for full assault. I want that station reduced to atoms. Begging your pardon, sir, but the defense grid is still active. Our scans show at least 2 more weapons arrays online. If we attack and she fires first, she's unconscious or dead from radiation exposure. Those weapons are unmanned." Ambassador Colin sat in Dust Bowl's command center, watching the Crimson Fleet maneuver into attack positions. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to evacuate, to save himself. But he stayed in his seat and kept his 4 hands steady on the targeting controls. Nenah had given him the tools. The least he could do was use them. "All colonists to emergency shelters," he broadcast throughout the station. "Sealpulkets. This is not a drill." The volunteer fighters gathered in the station's main corridors. 20 people with mining tools and homemade weapons, preparing to defend their home against professional killers. Peter checked his equipment one more time, wondering if he'd live to see another sunrise in the medical bay. Dr. Hayes watched Nenah's vital signs fluctuate. The girl was fighting for every breath. Her body was shutting down from the radiation damage. Hayes had done everything she could. Now it was up to Nenah's stubborn human biology. Drastak's fleet opened fire. The first barrage was designed to overwhelm the defense grid, a wall of plasma that would vaporize the station's weapons before they could respond. But Colin had learned from watching Nenah. He didn't try to shoot everything down. He picked targets, the lead destroyers, the ships coordinating the attack pattern. The defense grid spoke again. More surgical strikes, more disabled vessels. The Crimson Fleet's formation fractured as ships tried to avoid becoming the next target. "She's still fighting," Drastak's tactical officer reported. "The weapons are still firing." "Then she's not alone." The Warlord's eyes narrowed. "Someone else is operating those systems. Find out who and target them specifically." The fleet adjusted tactics. Instead of overwhelming firepower, they went for precision. Missiles streaked toward the command center where Colin sat. The Trell saw them coming and fired every weapon he had access to. Half the missiles died in explosions of light. The other half kept coming. Point 1 got through. It punched into the station's outer hull, tore through 3 decks, and detonated 15 feet from the command center. The blast threw Colin from his chair. Alarm screamed. Emergency force fields activated to seal the breach, but the command center was compromised. Smoke filled the room. Colin dragged himself back to the controls. His upper left arm was broken. His scales were scorched. But the targeting computer was still functional. He fired again. And again. Each shot took another piece from Drastak's fleet. Not enough to win. Just enough to make the Warlord pay for every inch in her medical bed. Nenah's eyes snapped open. She heard the explosions, felt the station shuddering under bombardment. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. Stay down, Hayes ordered, pushing her back. You've taken enough radiation to kill 3 adults. You're not going anywhere. Colin can't hold them alone. Nenah's voice was barely a whisper. Need to help. You've done enough. You bought us time. The Coalition is scrambling to respond. We just need to survive a little longer. Another explosion rocked the station. Closer this time. The medical bay's lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, they heard the sound of hull breaches and emergency sealant systems activating. Nenah closed her eyes and thought about her father. Thought about the look on his face when she'd fixed the mining drill. Thought about every lesson he'd taught her about not giving up, even when the situation seemed impossible. Her hand found the mechanical bird in her pocket. Somehow it had survived everything. She wound the key with shaking fingers and listened to it chirp. Drastak's fleet pressed the attack. They'd lost 5 ships disabled, 3 more damaged. But they were breaking through. The defense grid was running out of ammunition. The station's hull was compromised in 17 places. On the flagship's bridge, Drastak smiled. Continue the bombardment. I want to watch this station die, slowly. Then his tactical officer spoke up, voice shaking. Sir, we have incoming vessels. Multiple hyperspace signatures. The Warlord spun to face the view screen. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around them. Coalition cruiser. Their weapons were charged, and their targeting systems were very clearly locked onto the Crimson Fleet. This is Captain Williams of the Coalition Navy. All vessels will cease fire immediately. Warlord Drastak, you are hereby ordered to stand down under authority of the Galactic Council. Drastak's jaw clenched. He looked at his damaged fleet, at the reinforcements surrounding him, at the mining station that had cost him so much. This isn't over. Actually, another voice broke into the transmission. It was weak, but unmistakable. Nenah's voice. It is. Everyone in the galaxy just watched you get beaten by a mining colony. By a child. Your reputation is finished. Silence filled every channel. Because she was right. The broadcasts had gone everywhere. Drastak's entire power base was built on fear and intimidation. But you can't intimidate people who've watched you fail. The Warlord knew when he was beaten. Fleet, withdraw. As the Crimson Fleet began retreating, Captain Williams hailed Dust Bowl Station. We're sending medical teams and repair crews. Is Robert Reeves still alive? Nenah managed a smile despite the pain. He better be. We had a deal. Coalition medical teams swarmed the station within the hour. Nenah was transferred to their ship, placed in a specialized chamber designed to treat radiation exposure. The doctors spoke in quiet voices about cellular damage and long-term effects. They didn't think she could hear them. She could. Dr. Hayes refused to leave Nenah's side. The girl had saved 200 lives. The least Hayes could do was make sure she survived to see the results. 3 days passed. Nenah drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting a battle against damage that should have killed her immediately. Human stubbornness, one doctor remarked, seemed to extend all the way down to the cellular level. On the 4th day, she woke to find her father sitting beside her bed. Robert Reeves looked terrible. His face was still swollen from the beating. His ribs were wrapped. One arm hung in a sling. But he was alive and he was smiling. Hey kiddo, he said softly. Heard you've been busy. Nenah tried to laugh, but it hurt too much. Fix the defense grid. Just like you taught me. You did more than that. Robert reached out and took her hand carefully, mindful of the medical equipment attached to her. You reminded the galaxy what humans are capable of. Over the next few weeks, Nenah learned what had happened while she was unconscious. The Coalition had arrested Drastak under charges of violating the Accord of Protected Species. Ambassador Colin had invoked an ancient treaty that protected any species whose young demonstrated exceptional courage in defense of their people. The legal argument was shaky, but backed by overwhelming public pressure. The broadcasts of Nenah challenging the Warlord had spread everywhere. Other colonies that Drastak had terrorized were coming forward with their own stories. The Crimson Fleet was fracturing as subordinate captains abandoned a leader who'd lost his reputation for invincibility. But there were consequences too. The Coalition couldn't ignore that Dust Bowl had operated illegally, that Robert had hidden weapons systems in violation of treaties, that Nenah had activated those weapons without authorization. Captain Williams visited the medical bay personally to explain. The Council is offering a deal. Dust Bowl Station gets full legal status and coalition protection. In exchange, Robert serves as technical advisor, helping us locate other hidden weapons caches in frontier stations. No jail time, but there will be oversight. Robert looked at Nenah. She nodded slightly. It was the best they could hope for. We accept, Robert said. 6 months later, Nenah stood in front of a memorial built in Dust Bowl's main plaza. The names of the 3 colonists killed in Drastak's warning shot were carved into polished stone. Fresh flowers lay at the base, brought by people from stations across 3 sectors. The plaza was crowded. Reporters from a dozen species had come to document Dust Bowl's recovery. The station looked different now. Coalition engineers had helped rebuild the damaged sections. The agricultural dome had been restored, bigger than before. New defensive systems, legal ones this time, protected the colony. But the biggest change was the people. Colonists who'd been ready to run now walked with purpose. They'd learned something about themselves during those desperate hours. They'd learned they could fight back. A young diplomat approached Nenah. The creature was from a species she didn't recognize, with blue skin and 6 fingers on each hand. I'm Deputy Minister Tal. I've been assigned to humanity's petition for full coalition membership. Nenah looked up at the tall diplomat. We're not even trying for membership. We're just a mining colony. Not anymore. Tal gestured to the crowd, to the reporters, to the ships in orbit. What happened here changed perspectives. The Council is reconsidering their position on human integration into galactic society. Because I shot at a warlord? Because you prove that humans don't break easily. That you protect what's yours. That even your children will fight when cornered. Tal's expression was hard to read. These are qualities the galaxy needs to understand about your species. Nenah thought about that. About her father refusing to beg. About Kalin staying at his post despite the danger. About 20 volunteers with mining tools ready to face professional killers. We don't start fights, she said quietly, but we finish them. Tal nadit slowly. That's exactly what the Council is afraid of, and exactly why they need to work with you rather than against you. The diplomat left. Nenah sat on a bench near the memorial, watching the crowd. Peter waved from across the plaza. He was coordinating the agricultural teams now, making sure the new dome operated at peak efficiency. Ambassador Kalin was deep in conversation with a coalition admiral, probably discussing the legal framework for frontier protection. Dr. Hayes appeared and sat beside Nenah. The older woman looked tired but satisfied. Your latest scans came back. The radiation damage is healing faster than anyone predicted. You'll make a full recovery. Good. Dad needs help with a new mining equipment installation. Hayes smiled. You're 11 years old. You should be playing, not operating heavy machinery. I'm 11 years old, and I've already been in a war. Playing seems kind of boring now. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Nenah pulled the mechanical bird from her pocket. She'd repaired it after everything, fixing the gears that had been damaged during her crawl through the tunnels. She wound it up and watched it flap its wings. The simple mechanism her father had built, teaching her about engineering and patience and doing things right even when they were difficult. Robert joined them, walking carefully to favor his healing ribs. He sat on Nenah's other side and put his arm around her shoulders. You know what a honey badger is? Nenah asked him. Tough animal from Earth. Fights things way bigger than itself. Doesn't know when to quit. That's what I told them we are. When they asked me why I challenged Drastak. Robert pulled her closer. That's about right. We're not the biggest species. Not the strongest. Not the smartest. But we're too stubborn to die quietly. A ship landed in the distance, bringing more supplies and equipment. The colony's population had doubled since the battle. People want to be part of the place that had stood up to tyranny. They wanted to prove they had the same courage. Nenah watched the ship unload. Somewhere out there, Drastak sat in a coalition prison. His empire collapsed, his reputation destroyed. He'd struck what he thought was an easy target and discovered that humans don't break the way he expected. The galaxy had learned the same lesson that a group of children ran past, laughing and playing some game Nenah didn't recognize. They were young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Too young to remember the fear when the Crimson Fleet arrived. Young enough to grow up in a station that fought back and won. That was worth the radiation exposure. Worth the pain and the fear and the nights she still woke up shaking. Because these kids would grow up knowing they didn't have to be victims. They could choose to fight. "You okay?" Robert asked quietly. Nenah nodded. She wound the mechanical bird one more time and watched it sing. "Yeah, Dad, I'm okay." They sat together in the plaza, father and daughter, while around them a colony rebuilt itself into something stronger. The memorial stood behind them, a reminder of what they'd lost. The ships overhead represented what they'd gained. And in a dozen sectors in 100 colonies, people told the story of the warlord who struck the honey badger, who thought he could break a human child through fear, who learned too late that humans teach their young to bite back. The galaxy wouldn't forget that lesson anytime soon. And neither would Nenah Reeves, the girl who'd stared down a warlord and dared him to try again.